time, baby. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and I know I told you that last week was my last Olympic episode for a while, and well, I lied. A lot of you have reached out, and you want 2 Olympic interviews. The most requested one is for Elizabeth Swanee, who will not email me back. It's unfortunate, as I really do want to hear her story and find out her motivations. Since I couldn't get her, I have the next best thing out of the Olympics. A real live Olympic judge. I'm talking about U.S. Judge Steele Spence. There were a lot of questions and concerns around the Olympic judging, and having Steele to outline everything will clear things up for anybody who had questions. So next week I'll get back to those podcasts outside of the Olympic space. Unless I get a miracle with Elizabeth, and then she will be my guest next week, but I wouldn't cross my fingers. I will say the games were fun to watch. It seemed like it kept politics out of the headlines, and that was awesome. I won't think about most of the athletes other than the skiers and snowboarders for about 4 years. All in all, it was great for the sports. It was fun to watch, and now that is over. As always, please follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement and share my posts, which apparently not too many of you do, but that's quite all right. You definitely listen, and I thank you for that. I also need to thank Christian Folk over at Outdoor Research for sending me a new everything. I am dialed in OR wear, and I will finally be dry here in the Northwest. I also want to thank my show's sponsors. The show doesn't happen without them, and they are Evo, Rescue Water, the 10 Barrel Brewery, the Summit at Snoqualmie, and Unofficial Networks. Please go to their sites, drink their products, and save money by using the codes in the ads. Now, let's talk to Olympic judge Steele Spence. You just get back from South Korea?
Yep, like 2 days ago, and fighting the jet lag and the event hangover and everything. Pretty hard, but it was good.
Was this your first Olympics?
It was my first Olympics judging. I was in Sochi for the whole run, doing a little work for NBC there since it was the debut of our sports. I worked with the producers for the TV show side of it to kind of help them out as their insider on the sport. So I had a great experience in Sochi working with NBC on that one. And then this was my first one judging.
And what was the experience like in South Korea?
South Korea is great, man. It was really cool. I've been a number of times over the last couple of years here, hosting judging education clinics, and then we had 2 test events at Phoenix Park the last 2 years leading up to this. So I have gotten familiar with the area a little bit over time, and the food's great, the people are amazing, but the skiing's not much to write home about. Like, Sochi was the best skiing ever. I've never skied lift access terrain like that before. It was incredible.
In terms of the food, was there anything weird that you ate?
Not particularly. Some of the other judges went into Seoul one night and had the live octopus, which I guess is one of their specialties, but I haven't had that. And other than that, just Korean barbecue on special occasions, and then the everyday food was just plain good food.
Totally different diet than the U.S.? Is that why we're so fat and they aren't?
A little bit. I mean, I don't know how the Koreans eat totally day to day on that, because a lot of our meals are served in the hotel or on the hill. They don't eat much cheese over in Asia, which is definitely something I miss when I'm over there. I'm like, man, I can't wait to get home and eat some cheese.
It's the little things, right?
That's right.
You were there being a judge, but your whole life you were an athlete until you became a judge. While we are going to talk about Olympic judging, I think we should talk about your life because it really explains why you are a judge and the qualifications that you have. Are you born and raised in Aspen?
I am born and raised in Aspen. I was 9 pounds, 10 ounces, and I was the heaviest baby born at Aspen Valley Hospital because I was like 3 weeks late or something. So I held the record as the heaviest baby born at Aspen, which was like 8,600 feet above sea level. I held that record for like 20 years or something like that.
You ever meet the kid that beat you?
No, I guess it was a Latino kid, and my parents saw it in the paper, and were like, dude, someone beat your record.
Well, if you find him, you should beat the shit out of him.
That's right. You wipe me from Aspen Valley Hospital history.
Yeah. Anybody that's from Aspen, I assume, is beyond rich. Were your parents super rich growing up?
It was funny. I mean, because it's a real small community of the locals that are actually living and working there. I've found out later as high school went on, which kids had wealthy families and things like that. But for me, most of the kids I grew up with, all their parents worked for Aspen Ski Co. or worked for hotels. things like that, just like my parents did. And I actually didn't realize that Aspen was Aspen until I was, say, 15 or something like that and started traveling. And people are like, dude, you're from Aspen? Because I wasn't taking any interest in what celebrities were there. There wasn't really internet that I was paying attention to or anything like that. So I had no idea the reputation that Aspen had outside of it, because all my friends and all their parents were just the local workforce.
Are your parents ski bums?
My dad moved to Snowmass, so I'm from Snowmass Village particularly. The resort opened in 68 and he moved there in 69. And his first job was as a night auditor at a hotel so he could ski all day. So he started off with that, but he did have his MBA when he went there and started off as a night auditor so he could ski, then worked his way up and he was general manager of some condominiums there for 35 years.
You weren't the stereotypical Aspen kid. When I say stereotypical Aspen kid, I mean driving a Porsche, probably skiing a shit ton, but did you see kids like that in your high school?
Not as much as the born and raised crowd, but like kids would come in middle school and high school from, wealthy families, like Ron Popeil's daughter, for example.
Who is that?
Ron Popeil, the inventor of the food dehydrator and the Popeil pocket fisherman. He's on all those infomercials.
I should definitely know who he is. He sounds like an important figure.
Yeah.
So that was your celebrity friend?
Pretty much, yep.
Being born in Aspen, I'm sure you start skiing at a young age and you get into the Aspen Ski Club. And I would think everybody's a serious skier there because that's what you do in Aspen. But do you play any other sports?
Yeah, so I started skiing when I was 2.5, 3, right in there, like a lot of the kids do. Ski school to Aspen Valley Ski Club when I was about 11 or so, and went in the freestyle program. So in wintertime, there was that, but didn't really focus on training with the ski club as much until like later in middle school. But like once I got into high school, I was focusing on mogul skiing more and more. It was more like dryland training in the fall, focus on training and skiing all through the winter. And then I ran the track season in the spring, but those kind of focused on skiing after that.
In terms of your mogul skiing, I mean, you were a badass. You did moguls and upright aerials. What are upright aerials?
Uprights are without any inverts. We didn't have an invert air hill at Aspen, and a lot of the Colorado resorts didn't either. So at each weekend, we travel around Rocky Mountain Division and compete in moguls and upright aerials. Steamboat, Winter Park, Breck, Vail, Arapahoe Basin, all these ones hosted the weekend contest. So every weekend, we're out at the mogul comps competing in uprights because there wasn't inverted aerial competition. I'm sure I would have been doing that if it was kind of available. But uprights were bigger things. Like some guys would just be out there and like, you get judged on the same tricks as in the mogul run, which there were no inverts at that time. So kids are doing like Daffy Twister spread and stuff like that just on the upright air hill. Or we're doing 360 iron crosses, 720s, stuff like that.
What are those jumps like? Are they the aerial jumps that we're used to seeing?
Yeah, it looks just like an air hill, just like an inverted aerial hill, except with a lot less steep jumps.
That took you all the way to the Junior Worlds in the Czech Republic when you were like 17.
That's absolutely right.
But eventually everything changes for you and you shift over to pipe and slope, and that's when it's all just starting. And how do you make that switch?
It just caught my interest. I mean, I love mogul skiing and I still do. I actually think it's a great sport. Some people will trash on it, but I had an amazing experience through moguls and I have a lot of respect for mogul skiing. But when I was out about that age, it was 16, 17, this stuff just was starting to come around, like 97, 98 Whistler Open. Started to catch little bits of it there and just gravitated towards it right when I first started seeing it, but still dedicated to moguls at the same time and just kind of doing a little bit of both, like be training moguls, then sneak off and push the half pipe that skiers weren't allowed in at the time. I was snowboard only. Or at mogul comps, we'd sneak out at, like, wouldn't sneak out, but we'd go out at night and slide handrails a little later on. And then it would have been about 99, and there were starting to be more competitions to do in slopestyle, half pipe. US Open was around, Whistler Open, forget what else I competed in, some events out in Tahoe, but just found that that's where I wanted to go and started doing some tricks that got some attention, slid into the kind of the second generation of skiers for free skiing.
Yeah, it was almost like there was that new Canadian Air Force and that whole group's the first generation where you slide in the second. I feel like you almost slid in with that second group, but it almost transferred to the third group. Later in your career, looking at you being a rail master and then seeing some of the young bucks coming up and not knowing your history, almost giving you shit on the internet, at least, for whatever they think about your skiing. And it's because they were the next group of young punks to come up and really innovate the rail game, where you were bringing rails to the table.
Cool to hear you say that. I mean, I, at the time, wasn't thinking about it. I was just enjoying it. And like all the film crews would bring me to the rails. Back in the day, it was all about getting to the end of the gnarly rail. And I guess I had some good balance and some good go at it, and I could grease some rails that other people weren't doing. I mean, it was right in the beginning there when not much was happening. So, like you said, I feel the first generation spot on with the Canadians doing stuff there. Second round, all of us are right at the same age. Tanner Hall, Candide, we're all in same grade in high school there. Yoon, Christie, Leskinen, we're all the same age in that second wave to go in. And I found I liked slopestyle more, and on the film side of things, the urban handrails more, and just kept gravitating towards that and doing more and more of it.
Yeah, I think it was you and Yannick B would be the names that really shot up to the top, especially in those early days. I think a similar thing between you and Yannick is you both have rollerblading backgrounds.
Yep, and I think that definitely had some bit to do with it for sure. I loved skating as a kid, did a lot of that. My parents were like, yeah, you probably could have gone pro in rollerblading if you had followed that.
Good thing you didn't.
Go, because that sport eventually kind of died out there. But yeah, always sliding rails on rollerblades. So I took to it right away on skis when that first started popping up. And then same with some of the tricks. Like I had seen rollerbladers, I'd never done it myself, but like do misty flips. And just one day did it on my skis on this little jump at Snowmass. Johnny DeCesare thinks it might have been one of the first ones. We were going to cross-reference the footage, but never did. But the year that I had it, my parents were videotaping it with the home camera. We kind of wanted to check those dates and line it up, but it may have been one of the first ones there, he was thinking.
So you invented the misty flip on skis, which is pretty amazing.
I'm not claiming that. I was just saying it could have been.
You lost the record for being the heaviest baby in Aspen, but you invented the misty flip. That's what's coming out of the podcast. Congratulations on that one.
Not my words.
High school is when your ski career starts picking up. In 2000-ish is when I think you're getting noticed by sponsors for slope style and sliding rails. And is that about the time when you first start getting people that notice your skiing and want to give you either money or product?
It was, yeah. I think I made a sponsor me video when I was a junior in high school, 99 or 2000. Sent out my sponsor me video. Both Smith and Oakley responded to it and ended up going with Smith. They were kind of my first sponsor, that and Obermeyer being a local company there. They got some great support behind me. So yeah, I got my first sponsorships there when I was a senior in high school.
Does that change you at all? Because I can imagine a kid in high school, it can go two ways. You're quiet and don't tell people about it, or you're like, hey, look at me. I've got all this stuff coming to me.
I was definitely proud of it. I mean, I grew up worshiping professional skiers like Scott Schmidt and Glenn Plake, you know, as a little kid in the mountains. And I truly idolized those guys as a little kid. So it was always kind of a dream to become a professional skier ever since I was really young. So I was proud of it, excited. I hope I wasn't obnoxious about it. I don't think I was.
I haven't heard anything about you being obnoxious about it, but you never know. So you graduate in 2001, and what is your plan straight from high school? What do you do?
So I wanted to start chipping away at college a little bit. I did one semester at Sierra Nevada College in Tahoe, and I knew that my winters were going to be full of travel. So I did my first semester of college just to get some gen ed stuff done there, and I had one trip to Europe for Rip Curl, Big Air, and Sauce Fe that I stepped away from school for a week-long trip out there for a Big Air, and then by Christmas, you know, the first semester or trimester, whatever it was over, and hit the road with my sponsors to compete and shoot, and kind of kept that up for the next couple of years there.
Okay, and before we get any further, I'm going to jump into my sponsors really quick. And my first sponsor is Evo. And Evo is way more than the best ski, snowboard, surf, bike, skate, and clothing website in the country. Why? For a lot of reasons. One, they have retail locations in Denver, Seattle, and Portland, and they carry the best brands and only hire the most knowledgeable and approachable people to make your shopping experience great. They are an art gallery, a movie venue, a travel base, and they have the goal of making a difference in the world. On the web front, Evo offers a low price guarantee, free shipping on orders over $50, and a no-hassle return policy. For listening to the show, they're going to give you 10% off your entire order. When you check out, use the code capital TPM, the number 10, and you'll get your 10% off. My next sponsor is Rescue Water. They are proactive recovery. And if you've been hearing the ads on the podcast and still haven't tried Rescue Water, well, you're blowing it. What I want you to do is make Rescue Water your post-workout, ski, snowboard, skate park, or practice drink. Trust me, when you do, you will feel the benefits immediately, and it will hydrate you so much more than your traditional sports drink. There's no gimmicks here. It's science and it works. And the game changer for me is that it really works after a big night. Drink one before bed and you're good in the morning. I wake up feeling like I'm 21 again. And we're going to make it easier than ever to try Rescue Water. Head on over to rescuewater.com, that's resqwater.com, order a 12-pack, enter the code RESQWaterTPM, all one word, and you're going to get a 20% discount. Rescue Water is also available on Amazon and Amazon Prime. Those are my sponsors, so we'll get back into it. We were talking about you competing. You had mentioned the Rip Curl event that you went to, and I want to talk about that event for a minute because there's a rumor that goes around that event, and I want you to confirm or deny and let us know what went on here. You win this Australian Rip Curl event. For some reason, there was one of the sponsors was KY Jelly, and after the event, you had to jump in a pool of KY Jelly and wrestle for condoms with people. And is there any truth to this?
That's pretty much 100% true. And I was volunteered for it as well. I don't know if some of the event staff or other athletes, but after the event, there was a lubrication sponsor of this event. So I got signed up to wrestle a fairly attractive, I only did one round and it was against a fairly attractive Australian girl. Thank you. And the goal is you wrestle in this pool of KY Jelly to pull a condom off the other one's ankle. I lost my first round. She actually beat me, and I was only in there once. But that definitely happened.
Is that the dumbest thing you've ever had to do as a pro skier?
It's up there for sure. That's one of the only things kind of like that.
And you're in your ski gear when you're doing this?
No. Had a minute after awards. Back to the bar. I was grossly underage and got tossed into the pool.
You know, a thing about those days is you could be grossly underage, and if you're a competitor, they were going to get you in that bar, and you could pretty much do whatever you wanted. Did you have some good times back then in your underage to 25 days?
Yeah, I think, myself and a lot of the young pros had way more fun than anyone should really ever have in a whole lifetime around then. I mean, the sport was so new. We were all so young. We're traveling to Europe, traveling to the Southern Hemisphere. We weren't traveling with teams or coaches or anything. We were traveling with our team manager and our sponsor, and stuff was loose back then. Man, it was a lot of fun.
I feel like in those days you just had to show up. It wasn't really about focus on the contest the whole time. It was like, we'll focus on the contest when we have that 2 hours of training before that, but We're going to have fun until then.
It was a totally different mindset. I mean, I've never been a really competitive person. Like, anytime I've done well in a contest is just because I happened to be skiing well. I wasn't being coached. I never really had that kind of drive. Like, I wanted to do stuff that I wanted to do, but it's kind of a funny thing, like, as a professional competitor, to say I was never competitive, but I never actually thought about that. And some of the guys were, it's a personality thing, but I never kind of had that. Anytime I ever got on a podium, it was just because I happened to do well enough that day because I was trying that hard, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think the whole vibe of the industry, that it makes sense within that vibe where people weren't, I hate to use the word jock, but there is more of a jock mentality on the high-end competition level now where you're thinking about the gym, you're thinking about what you eat, and you're thinking about not partying as much just to keep yourself ready for the contest, where back then, if it was the night before the contest and you guys weren't going until 10, people were going to be out. I mean, I would see competitors at the bar and it was no big deal. It was kind of expected.
Absolutely.
It's a different world.
It was a different world.
Completely. But in that world, and I will say the more fun world, maybe not as lucrative, but maybe based on the timing of it when you were a pro, you had a lot of great sponsors. And You were on the international teams for Smith, Atomic, eventually Forefront, Aspen Snowmass, OGO, Rip Curl, Hestra, Kicker. All great sponsors to have. And in terms of a pro skier, back at the time that you were a pro skier, what was the most you could make in 1 year? What was your biggest year as a pro?
Oh, let's see. I think I was making maybe between prize money and sponsorships like $65,000, $70,000 a year, which is a lot of money for a kid.
A lot of money for a kid, especially a kid who normally finish in the top 10, but usually it's like 4 and above.
Sometimes, yep. But consistently a top 10 skier. Yep.
$65,000 for a 18, 19-year-old is pretty fucking awesome. What kind of car did you drive back then?
I got a Chevy Tahoe. It was used, but I also, in 2001, I bought an 02 RMK snowmobile and trailer straight up. And then I had my Chevy Tahoe and I was feeling pretty good about life.
A big thing for you or for any athlete who makes it into the X Games is the X Games, because at that point it's kind of the pinnacle of the sport. It's the Olympics for everyone. And you made it there, I believe, 5 times. I think your highest finish was 4th.
That's absolutely right.
Were the X Games always in Aspen when you were competing?
Yeah, the first year that I got my X Games invite was the first year that X Games went to Aspen.
That had to be amazing for you, having everyone you know at the biggest contest of your life. Did that put extra pressure on you?
Not too much. I think my first X Games, I finished 11th or somewhere around there. Was absolutely happy with it. I mean, there was a ton of support. At that point, I wasn't thinking about, really going for the podium or anything like that. I just went and did what I did. It's just, first year was just blown away being in X Games. Happy to be there. I was happy with how I did. And then for the next 2 years, did a little better until I eventually got my highest place and was 4th that year.
2003, this is the interesting X Games year for me when I look at your career. So you do the last chance qualifier to get in the X Games. So you're competing with 133 other people to get your spot into the X Games. And you're competing with some big names. At the end of the day, 4 people tie. And it is yourself, Nick Mercon, who is, if you haven't seen any of Nick Mercon's movies, The Guatemalan Persuader in particular, I know you've seen it, best movie in skiing, like in the history of skiing, in my opinion. A guy who was in that movie, Rory Silva, who is one of the best people in skiing, wherever he is. He's an amazing dude. And then Chris Booth, who's running everything over at Black Crows and is just a badass. 4 of you guys tie. I don't really care about that, but I'm bringing it up because not only are they all-stars, but being a judge today, could you imagine an event where 4 people tie?
At the top, too. I've thought about that since in judging. I mean, I never try and give the same score to anyone as a judge. Otherwise, I feel like I'm not doing my job right. And then to have a tie up at the top of an X Games qualifier like that, I mean, it goes to show how things were a lot more loose back in the day.
I mean, that's not possible today, right? We couldn't have 4 people tied for Olympic gold.
No, definitely not. Nowadays, I mean, the way the numbers came out, even if it does come out to a tie based on the judges' score, like, first of all, we try and avoid that at all costs, but there's a computer system and program for tie breaking that goes into more scenarios down the road than you can ever imagine to break ties. So, yeah, ties don't happen in our sport anymore, but they used to.
When you were competing, what was your take on judging?
I never thought about it all that much. It's funny, I never really questioned who the judges were. I honestly don't know who I was being judged by back in the day. And it could have just been me. I'm sure a lot more, some other competitors were really focusing on that kind of stuff more. And it was just something I never really thought of as much. But the first time that I did judge a contest, the first thing I said to myself was like, wow, I would have been a completely different competitor if I ever once thought about judging or put myself in the judge's shoes a little bit more.
I used to be a team manager, and I tell a lot of the athletes when we go to comps, hey, the judges are here. We're at this bar the night before. Why don't you ask them what they're looking for? It's not going to hurt you to ask them that, and it can only help you, but I don't think anybody ever really wanted to do that.
No, Don't know if we did, and it's a good thing to do, and it's actually something we still encourage to this day. I mean, as judges, we are always happy and open to talk with particularly athletes. A lot of times now it's the coaches that are coming up to talk, but it's kind of a unique thing about the sport to encourage this open line of communication between the judges, athletes, and coaches in this kind of weird three-way triangle that we have going on. But I think it's good. I mean, it's something that I should have been doing back in the day.
In terms of your career, another side of it was you were in the movies, and a lot of ski movies. You filmed with Matchstick. You were in Ski Movie 3, which I just think it's awesome that you were in one of the ski movies, because to me that trilogy was phenomenal. You're in Focus, the Frontline Yearbook. I think Focus was probably your standout with MSP, in my opinion. You filmed with Poor Boys and Iberg. You filmed with Level 1. And with all those groups, who were your favorite people to travel with? Skiers, filmers, who are the people that made the trips a lot of fun?
Yeah, man. I think Poor Boys, for one, that was kind of the coolest film crew at the time. I mean, Level 1 developed to that as well, but early on during my first Level 1 movie was Second Generation, Strike 3, and it was a newer film company, and Berman's a great guy, and I love filming with him. But to be in the Poor Boys movie, for me, at the time, was kind of my first shot I had in a Poor Boys movie. I freaked out. We went to the movie premiere. I had a shot in the opening sequence, didn't have a segment that first year. And all my friends jumped on my head and started freaking out. It was a rail-to-rail gap at Mammoth Super Park. And who would have been 13 in the intro to that? Or was it the intro to the game? Something like that. That was a huge deal for me at the start of my filming.
Poor Boys, they had their finger on the pulse of the core.
When you ask about the athletes, I mean, since JF Cousin, JP Auclair are filming with Poor Boys, those guys were huge to me. I mean, I wasn't too far behind them, but I looked up to them so much. I mean, and they were with the Poor Boys crew.
All the legends were filming with those guys. They did film with other people as well, but it seemed like they started with Poor Boys. As we move through your career, 2005-ish, you go to work for Forefront, and you're a part owner of Forefront too, I believe. Now, I've spoken with Matt on the podcast, and he said he never made any money from Forefront. They never turned a profit. You were a partner in that, and Matt recently sold. Do you make any money from being a partner in Forefront?
Nope, did not. And that's okay. I mean, Matt and I have been having a lot of great conversations lately, like thinking back about everything that we went through. So I came on to Forefront in 2003, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, 03, Matt approached me at summer camp up in Whistler. He said, this is what I'm doing. At the time, I had this great sponsor with Atomic, and Matt sold me on it. He said, just started this, want you to be a partner. There's dreams of making a whole bunch of money off of it, too. But I was sold on the idea completely of being part of my own brand, a core brand like that, and going it. So after that summer, after my Atomic contract expired, and, some back and forth talks with them, the draw of the core brand and the pro model ski and everything like that went in. So that was the second year that Forefront was in business. So I was one of the first partners in it.
How many pro model skis did you get?
Let's see, 4 seasons maybe of the STL.
Do you have them at home, brand new in plastic?
Absolutely.
Good.
At my parents' house, I got an unmounted set of each.
Good. You should. And while you're working with Forefront, you get some opportunities to judge some events, and I think that's where it all starts for me. You're working as a graphic designer. Are you designing products as well?
Yes, and the way that went, I mean, my skiing career was kind of winding down. I wasn't competitive in the slopestyle events anymore and focused on my last year there on filming segments with Level 1. And even that I knew was kind of winding down. I wasn't at the top, and that's how fast the sport moves, because it's not like I was that old or anything. But I injured my neck filming with Level 1 up in Alaska and fractured a vertebrae. It was actually on my 25th birthday.
Fun. Happy birthday to you.
Yeah, right. Something that I recovered from fine without surgery or anything like that. It was just some fractures in my neck. But I kind of knew that it was time for me to phase out of that anyway. So moved to Salt Lake City and start working in the Forefront office. I had been involved with the design of my pro model and a few other things, working with Sturbans up to that point. And then went full-time into the office, and I would design one set of graphics each year at least. But then a lot of other things, like I really liked the t-shirt designs, would do the branding for our bindings and poles, packaging, and then did some cut and sew hoodies and sweatshirts and things like that. So all this stuff that's really enjoyable and rewarding as a designer to see your products come in mass shipment and be like, all right, design this. But it's hard going from the ski career, travel, being involved in all the events and everything to graphic design's, basically a glorified desk job. I'm in front of my computer all day, every day for the first time in my life. Not that it wasn't rewarding and super cool and it was still in the ski industry, but I had an opportunity come up to judge the US Open. I was talking with some of the event organizers for that, and I'd never even thought about judging before, but it just came up randomly like, hey, actually, we are looking for additional judges for this. So that's how I got into my first judging booth. I said, sure, why not?
Is judging fun, or is it just a way for you to get back into travel and into skiing again?
It was fun. I was blown away. So Mike Atkinson was the head judge.
Love that guy.
I'm trying to remember who else was on that first panel. I think Scogan might have been on it as well. A bottle of Jack Daniels went down on the table at the start of the day. I'm like, holy cow, this is judging? Blew my mind. It was so nice to be back at a contest, I had a good time with it. And then what really sealed the deal, so I judged US Open, and then like a week and a half later, Atkinson calls me and says, hey, they need judges at European Open and Locks too. Are you available? I said, hell yeah, I am. And just took off with it from there.
So you're an athlete that doesn't have to perform at all. You just go sit and watch them.
Exactly. Yeah, guaranteed to get paid at every one, although not much.
As far as your design career goes, because you designed for Forefront, I think you designed for Empire Attire. Is that right?
Yeah. Then started to judge one or two. Was ready to actually get back to Colorado. For a while, I was living in Denver as part of my ski career, and then being close to the airport and going to school there. Went from Denver to Salt Lake. Kind of had a bit of urge to get back into the mountains for a number of things. So I had some judging stuff start to come up. My wife and I moved back to Colorado, to Summit County, and talked with Simon Dumont about his company that's starting up, and then did a couple seasons of product design for Empire for him.
In terms of your judging career, because I'm going to segue into the Olympics, but I will do that after I talk about my sponsors real quick. The first one, brews beer, drinks beer, and has fun doing it, period. I'm talking about the 10 Barrel Brewery based out of Bend, Oregon. And they not only do that, they also support and create a ton of events in the world of snow. They live and breathe the culture, and they want to support it with tasty beers like their Goggle Tan IRA. March is a huge month for 10 Barrel, as they are holding two of their signature Hella Big Air events. The first is at Copper Mountain on March 3rd, and then they bring their final event home to Mount Bachelor on March 31st. These events are all about watching the big dogs huck their meat to get their hands on some of that $30,000 of prize money, and it's about enjoying what 10 Barrel does best, drinking beer outside. If you ski or snowboard, support the beer that supports you. Find out more about the Hella Big Air events and the beer over at 10barrel.com. My final sponsor is the Summit at Snoqualmie, which has been my go-to ski destination for the past 20 years. There's a lot of great skiing in Washington State, but the Summit should be the go-to choice for Seattle skiers and snowboarders. As far as the mountains go, Alpental is the choice for the hardcore rider, while East, West, and Central have something for everyone. But really, the Summit's 45 minutes from Seattle, which makes powder weekday mornings a reality. You can shred the Summit and be back at your desk by noon. And on weekends, I've never spent more than an hour and a half in my car round trip, and I've never had to turn around because I couldn't find a parking spot. It's the only place in Washington that can boast that, and if you don't ski or snowboard, you have to check out the Tubing Hill. Anyone can do it, and it is so much fun. Find out more at summitatsnoqualmie.com. Those are my sponsors, so we'll get back into it, and we're going to talk about judging. And for you, I mean, I can give your qualifications if your prior history isn't enough. You've had 8 years as a pro-level FIS sanctioned judge. You've sat on the panels of the X Games and the Dew Tour for 5 years each, World Cup events like the U.S. Grand Prix and more. You helped write the book on free skiing judges before Sochi. And when you're not judging, you lead FIS workshops across the world. So you're part of FIS?
I am. My position with FIS is judging coordinator for free ski. And like you said, part of the responsibilities on that is the judging education and certification. So I've been doing that for, did my first clinics a couple years before Sochi. And this opportunity came up. I was actually had kind of started working on after judging for this amount of time, and there wasn't too much on paper for free ski specifically. So I just kind of started on my own working on this education material, putting stuff down on paper. It was in the fall, and FIS got word of that because there was a clinic happening in Annecy, France. And they're like, it's in 5 days or something like that. I said, okay, cool. Like, I can do it. I've got some material that I'm working on here. I've been collecting video, all this good stuff. I crank away on the presentation, work on it on my entire flight to France, hit save basically when I get there, and jump right into a 2-day presentation. The first judging clinic I ever did there started in Annecy, France.
Every athlete hates the FIS. And you represent them, I guess. Do you feel any animosity from athletes, or do they realize that you have to be part of the FIS to do your job?
I think that reality has kind of set in. I mean, all through our history, there's been, we can't go FIS, no Olympics. Snowboarding went through the same thing. I mean, skateboarding and surf are going through it, have been going through it now, and they're going to debut in 2020. I mean, it's all been the same. And my thought behind it, and this was talking with other industry people and stuff like that, but I kind of came to the decision myself, like, okay, FIS isn't going anywhere. They are the federation that's going to be linked to the IOC. We're in the Olympics now. The reality is, no matter what, any other organizations that come up, I never foresee FIS going anywhere. They're going to be that where our sport's leading now, competitive anyway. And that's another thing that we can talk about, like how cool skiing is, that there's so many different facets of it. So, I mean, this is specific to just competitive skiing. And now with Olympics being the highest level goal to get in competitive free skiing, FIS is there. And I decided, they're not going anywhere. So maybe I could do my best to be a part of it and make it as good as it can be.
That is one take on it. You could either fight the man or you could join the man. You join the man, and I think it's good to have some inside people from the free ski world on the corporate side as well. I don't think it's a bad thing, but I would think everyone doesn't like the FIS. I don't want to say some people because I haven't met anybody on the podcast yet who said anything positive, but that's what people do with authority. But it takes me to the subject of the Olympics, and the events at the Olympics were awesome for the most part. As far as any complaints for any event, I'm going to say that you personally are the end all for everything Olympics, and I want you to explain a lot of things that went on. So I've got a lot of questions I want to ask you about the Olympics.
All right.
How did you let the women's snowboard slopestyle event go down in those conditions? We know that you, the ski judges, rule everything, and you saved the alpine skiers by canceling their events, but it seemed like they're like, fuck the snowboarders, we'll throw them out there in 40-mile-an-hour winds when they're jumping just these ridiculous gaps. How does that even happen?
I'm definitely not sure on any of that. I know that a lot of the higher ups in FIS were definitely stressing about this, and there's been a lot looking into that. So for us as the free ski judges, I was en route to Korea when that happened.
Did you make the decision when you were en route? Because you made this decision.
Oh, no, I had nothing to do with that. It's the organizing committee. Nice try, though. So, yeah, no involvement on anything snowboard on my side. And even as a scoring judge for the ski side of things, I'm not on the jury. Only our head judge is. So, totally separate group of decision makers and jury members that go into the decision that went on the snowboarding. That's a representative from the organizing committee, the technical delegate, the head judge. I forget who the other one was, but that's all separate for snowboarding.
You guys had to have talked about it like, hey, I can't believe they put these women in these type of conditions, because I didn't think it was safe. I saw Spencer O'Brien pull up on her last jump just because she saw the gusts coming through. As a former athlete, like, what do you think about something like that?
Yeah, man. I mean, weather's something we deal with at every event. So when I landed in Seoul, and I pull out my phone right away to see like how snowboarding was going, because I followed the men really closely since I was about to judge them on the skiers on the same course. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a carnage fest. And the way I understand, the way it was explained, there's time blocks for everything, and they can adjust the schedule. We're trying to not adjust the schedule too much to affect other sports. The more you do that, the more it dominoes down the line. I don't know about the schedule with Alpine and how they were able to keep coordinating that with delays, but I do know, there's been a lot of, since the women's snowboard slope, a lot of talks. They're reviewing all the footage, getting feedback from coaches and athletes, making a decision, on what went wrong, if it was too dangerous, how many crashes did they think were affected by wind, things like that. And my understanding is it's in review on that side of things.
Well, they just ruined 4 years of girls' lives, whatever.
It's rough at these events all year long through World Cups and everything, being at the mercy of the weather. It happens fairly often. It was a shame that it happened for the ladies here at the Olympics for sure.
I get things happen and you're not in control of that. My next question is about one of the women's halfpipe skiers, which I'm sure you saw her run and loved it. Elizabeth Swanee, I believe is how you pronounce her name. And she was a skier who was able to take advantage of the system and get into the Olympics. And normally, me personally, I have no problems taking advantage of the system because the system's there to be taken advantage of. My problem was that she didn't have any tricks. If she had one trick above the lip, in my perspective, that would have legitimized her as maybe the best from Hungary. But the fact that she didn't really have a trick, it turned into a joke. And what are the judges saying when this is going down?
Yeah, so I've judged Elizabeth a number of times at all these World Cups leading up to the Olympics as well. And then the truth of it is too, the women's halfpipe field doesn't go that deep. A lot of these World Cup events, we're judging less than 30 women. At one of them that Elizabeth was at, the World Cup event in China, there was only 15 women competing. So basically just by her showing up to the events, because the field's not running that deep and having another nation to compete under their flag, basically all she had to do was sign up. So there's a number of ways to look at it. Okay, she competed, she went through it. There's really nothing we could have done on our end or anything to prevent it based on the way that it's set up. So she made it there based on her persistence going to the events. And that's just kind of the way that the Olympics work. They want to include as many nations in there as possible, the top riders from each nation to be included. If you go way down the field of US or Canadian pipe skiers, everyone blows her out of the water, obviously. But based on the quotas and the way that things went, she got it. It was there. There's talks about how to rearrange these quotas and qualifying to compete in Olympics, stuff that's in place for moguls. When I was a mogul skier, I couldn't just decide that I wanted to go to a World Cup.
Right.
There was a qualification process that had to go through. And this is the first time something like this really happened for us in our sport. I foresee some quota changes and qualification things changing in the next couple of years here before the next round of Olympic qualifying starts.
I've got to give it to her. She had a dream of making the Olympics. She did not have the ability at all to make the Olympics, and she still made the Olympics. There's something to be said for her planning, her coordination, and her ability to turn a dream into reality. And maybe not the response she wanted at the end of the day, but she made it happen. And I'm sure she can make a lot of other things happen if she was able to do this.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to. She did it, she committed to it, and she got there. That's that. Just like in the Olympics, at every World Cup she competed in, she was finishing last or second to last if somebody happened to crash on both their qualifying runs, things like that. But she didn't do anything wrong. We didn't do anything wrong as judges. It's just the way that it goes. And when you compare halfpipe to slopestyle, every ski resort everywhere in the world has got a rail garden, jumps, some kind of pathway for athletes to get into slopestyle skiing. But halfpipes are a real special venue. We don't think about it as much in Colorado because we've got a bunch of super pipes there, but most nations don't even have a single super pipe. So it's kind of a specialty sport, and the field of competitors just doesn't run nearly as deep as it does in slopestyle.
I can see that, and it's intimidating to drop into one of those pipes, even if you have one. So you've got to get over that barrier as well.
True.
In slope, there's baby features that can lead you up to getting good and hitting the big stuff. But in terms of the Olympic judging panel, how is one selected to be on the judging panel? Who do you go against for your nomination, and how are you selected?
So it's a two-step process. First, each nation, each NGB will nominate their nation's selection, their top judge. They'll submit a form, say, this is one or two U.S. judges that we'd like to nominate for the Olympics to be on the panel. And each nation does that. Then there's a committee inside of FIS that'll make the final selection. So those are the two steps that go into it. I obviously worked my way up to be kind of at the top of the U.S. judges in there. Was honored to get U.S. Ski and Snowboard to nominate me first. And then the second step was this committee full of representatives from different nations and everything like that decide on the final panel at the Fall Congress. So that was 2 years ago that I got the nomination.
And who else was nominated? Did you go against other people from the U.S.?
I don't know. Nobody told me in the end who the other nominations were. I could have been the only one. I'm not sure, though.
Well, you're obviously ridiculously qualified. Do the other judges from other nations have anything close to your experience?
Definitely. I mean, for us having Phil Bellinger is our head judge. I mean, he's an absolute legend in our sport.
Yep.
And he's been judging a little bit longer than I had as well. So he and I were the two judges with the longest professional skiing careers. Other nations have former competitors. Our French judge was a former competitor, same with our Slovenian judge. Not to the level that Phil and I made it to, but all of them have definite experience, both as athletes and judges. Yeah, a long time.
In the judging booth, does everyone have a screen? And are you guys able to control replays?
Typically at World Cups, we're not. At the Olympics, we did have the luxury of having this replay dial. It was kind of a surprise when we got there. It was technology that the scoring company had from the skier cross course. So Omega from skier cross brought in this dial. So we've got a live feed going on one of the monitors on the side by the head judge. And then after the run, he could dial it back. We could double check anything if we needed to.
They don't have them at every contest, but if they had the screens at the event where Shaun White got his 100, would he still have received a 100?
Yeah, and that's kind of on a different topic. So the way that overall impression judging works, each competition is its own ranking. Like we really need to think of each one as its own separate competition because the numbers essentially don't mean anything. I know TV announcers make a big deal about like, oh, it's a 97, it's 100. But for us as judges, what we're taught in the way that we approach each contest is we need to rank all of these riders in the appropriate place. So we use those numbers as a ranking, and we can use that whole range from 1 to 100. And if it's the last run of the day and it's the winning run, there's no reason why it couldn't use the full range and give that top score. You're just using the full range of scores you can give.
Okay, so the 100 doesn't mean it was perfect.
Right, exactly.
Every landing was as smooth as it gets, that every grab was locked. That doesn't matter. It's just they gave him 100 because they could.
Exactly.
And that sounds strange, though, that just because they could, they did, even though it wasn't perfect. Because, I mean, when you get a 100, it seems like he couldn't do any better. But I think he would say that he could have cleaned it up maybe a percent.
Yeah. I mean, and if that run had happened earlier on in the contest, if there was still 10 riders to go, the snowboard judges wouldn't have given 100 in case a run tops it. But being at the end of it, they decided it was their first place run. They just used their full range.
So if Oystein is going last and has his run that he had on his first run, would he have gotten a 100?
I don't think we would have done that. The snowboarders are a little bit better about communicating that. They've given hundreds in the past, and we try and communicate the idea that it's all about the ranking and not about the numbers. I personally would never give 100. Even though it doesn't matter, it still sends that message that this is the greatest run ever done, which is obviously the way people perceive Shaun White's scores. So I personally wouldn't, but it's not saying that I couldn't. In the end, it's all about the ranking. For us as judges, it's first place, second, third is the only numbers that we're thinking about, not the actual score.
And then how much time do you judges have? Because this is pretty serious shit. This is the most important thing in the world to these athletes. And in the NFL, it seems like they can take as much time as they need to replay a single down that won't impact the game. We're talking about the biggest moment of these people's lives. And how much time do you guys have to actually go through their run?
Yeah, not much. It's a lot of pressure in the booth for that reason. We have a dedicated time slot anytime with the live TV. They estimate, how long each run is going to take and give us a little time. I mean, we're usually trying to get scores in within 20 seconds of the run being complete. Sometimes it'll take less, and we can kind of get a little bit of jump on the schedule that way, and then spend a little bit more time on the tough calls. As you probably saw, like sometimes we left the rider there waiting in the corral where we're really sussing it out. But it's not because TV or the event or anyone's like, take your time, guys. We're getting yelled at like, hey, we need scores. let's get them in. We need to get this done. It's very stressful.
Does that ever impact you going back and looking at things even closer after the fact? If you were to look at all the runs now, would they be scored as well when you could look at every angle that we saw on TV?
Yeah, there's always that. I mean, and I have been digging back through footage, looking at my notes. It happens like that at every contest. We're used to this format. I judge a lot of events for live TV, all the World Cups, X Games, Dew Tour. Finals are usually on a live TV spot. So I've gotten used to it and really do absolutely everything I can to get it right first try. But obviously over the years, there's times things like, I could have gone the other way on that. A lot of times there can still be an argument. I mean, there's always going to be opinions, and that's why I like to take feedback from everyone and not take it too personally, because everyone I talk to could have a different opinion about it. And I think just due to the nature of the sport, there's always could be an argument why one thing could have gone one way or another. Stuff nags me post-event all the time, though. It's kind of the nature of it.
It's crazy, though, that in most cases you have 20 to 30 seconds to judge someone on the most important run of their lives. But that's just how it is, live TV.
Yep.
So you guys throw the top and bottom scores out. Are there any top and bottom scores that you see that are just totally out of whack? And it's like, how did you guys get there?
So actually, for ski, we do not throw out high and low scores. Snowboard went to 6 judges dropping high and low. And for ski, we're still 5 judges. All scores count. So the way that it works for us, I think there's a good bit to be said for each of the formats, and we're going to look to harmonize those between ski and snowboard. So for viewers and for everyone, it's the same format, same number of scores they see coming out for ski and snowboard. So that's something that's in the works here to harmonize ski and snowboard on that aspect. And I definitely think for the drop in high and lows, I know I like that because a judge can make his statement, be like, I believe that this was my first place run for me, and the score is going to go the way the majority of the judges rank it. But if you're dropping high and low, then that judge can still give that score, show, hey, for me, this was the first place run. And sometimes watching the snowboard judges, I've seen ones that are out of the range of the other guys. And if they have a good legitimate reason why they felt that way, I think it's all good. I mean, if everybody had the same opinion, we wouldn't need 5 or 6 judges. Only one person could judge it. So it's good that each judge is entitled to their opinion and they can express that a little bit more with the snowboarders dropping high and low scores. For us, with everything counting, we'll enter our scores and the head judge will see on his monitor, like I said, it's all about the rank. He'll see the scores come in, but it'll also show where each judge ranks it. So it's easy for him to see that 4 people had it in 4th and 1 person had it in 3rd. And if the guy that scored it in 3rd score is affecting it, I mean, it should come out that it ranks where the majority has it ranked, but it's up to the head judge to make sure that one single score doesn't bump the score away from the way that the majority has it. So that could be the only situation where it's clear that the majority has it in 4th, one guy has it in 3rd. If he needs to lower his score just a little bit to remain in the rank that the majority has it, it might do, and that would be made a lot faster and easier if his score just gets dropped.
In the judging booth, is there conversation between the judges, or are you guys looking at this independently, judging it and not influencing each other with your opinions? Or are you guys talking about everything?
There is communication in the booth that starts with assigning a trick caller. So one of the judges, as the run's in progress, one of the judges will be calling the tricks because we're taking notes on our steno at the same time that the run is happening live. And this is a good effort just to make sure that everybody has the right information down on paper. So I was the trick caller for the majority of the events in the Olympics here. And then as I'm calling tricks, other judge will pop in. I'll be like, switched up cork 12 mute. And then one of the judges say short mute. I was like, yeah, short mute or whatever. But each judge takes their own notes as how they see. So we all have the same trick on paper. And then each judge will have their own marks on what they think about the execution or the amplitude or any mistakes have in it. And then when the run's over, each of us looks down at our paper, compares to a similar run that we're thinking where it compares to, then give a score to rank it either above or below that, goes to the head judge. Then the head judge will see if there's any big differences on where it's coming out. And at that point, we could have a short, brief conversation, since we only have 20 seconds there, to say hey, why do you guys have it? Or you guys are split on this? Why are you thinking this way? Why are you thinking that way? In the end, each judge is entitled to give whatever score they feel.
But is there an influence when someone has a score and you're questioning why they do that? Is there ever a case where they change their score based on someone else's opinion?
Not as much about opinion, but we're judging so many runs in one sitting that I've actually found it to be helpful. Like, I'll be looking at it and it's like, okay, you guys are a little different on this one, judge one, like, why were you lower? And the dude could be like, because I think he missed his grab on that one, or he had a hand drag on this. I'd be like, okay, I didn't catch that. Like, that's a really good point. He did have a hand drag on there. Then I might adjust accordingly.
But do you go to the replay there to see?
Exactly.
To be quite honest, there was a lot of complaints about judging on the internet and in the ski community, and they might not understand everything that went into judging. So that's why we're talking. But I think in terms of slope, qualifiers was where there was a lot of questions. One thing that I noticed was it didn't seem like the weight of the rails was the same as the jumps. Look at Alex Hall's first run. He came off early on one of his rails, but his jumps were solid, and he ends up with a 69. Is it a 50-50 balance between rails and jumps?
So the qualifiers was a big one for us. Is actually the thing that I was stressing about most since I got my Olympic nomination, and really what I was thinking about most coming into the Olympics. Half pipe's way more straightforward. Slope style qualies is really the one that I was actually nervous about, because we're ranking 60 of the most insane slope runs you could ever do. And I think coming in after watching all those 60 runs, ranking them, we've been down. I think we were pretty critical on smaller mistakes. That was kind of how I was going into it. Be like, okay, this is the highest level contest. The guys that are going to finals here are going to need to have runs without any mistakes. We need to rank 60 runs within 100 points here. So that's where we tried to open up the range. And each competition, we see it as its own separate competition. We give the points to rank them. And I knew I had to fit a lot of runs into this. And with any run with a small mistake, an off early, a missed grab, or a short grab, I think we were maybe hammering them a little bit on that in order to kind of not get too jammed up, looking for anything to differentiate between the runs and still have room to rank everybody.
So after the qualies, do you guys sit down and debrief, and do you notice any inconsistency or discuss that at all in the qualifying round?
Yeah, like I said, I was stressing. So it came out of the slope qualies like, oh my God, what just happened here? Like, that was hectic. My mind was just on overload. After all that, it was a hard round of competition to judge. So I didn't talk to the other judges. I took the elevator down. I was like, I need to go for a walk here. I went out, got some air, took a little walk around, came back up and kind of recentered. I was like, all right, came back up and I looked at the 12 finalists that were going to finals. I'm like, okay, cool. Maybe they're not in the exact right order here, but I feel like the right people are going to finals. The bubble at these competitions are always hard. I knew going into that slope qualies that there was going to be so many good runs that weren't going to make finals at that level of competition. And that's heartbreaking for these guys, but it's true when you have 30 of the most insane slopestyle skiers in the world and only 12 go to finals. It's like so many good runs aren't making finals. So took a look at who's going to finals. I'm like, all right, cool. It's maybe not in exactly the right order, but I think we got a right crew of 12 people into the finals here. Let's recenter, look at this as a new competition, and try and get it right in the next round here.
Then you go into finals, and there were some questions there too. I would say Oystein getting that high score so early, that has to be a challenge for the judges because you're setting the bar, and it's the top. And I think that was the right top run. That was the winning run, and he should have gotten the gold medal. But when you put a score that high that early, are the judges questioning scoring that high in the beginning?
For me personally, I know I didn't want to underscore it with that many good runs and get crammed up and not have room to rank someone in the low 90s there. Here, let me double check my notes here. I was like, okay, if we do happen to see 5 better runs for this and I end up giving a 99, I'm okay with that because that's the way it goes, but I don't want to get crammed up and have to not have room to give someone another score in the low 90s there. So that was kind of what was going through my head at the time. Let's see, what did I give him? I gave Oystein a 95 on his first run score there. Yeah. So I saw Oystein's run. I'm like, okay, this is a top run, potentially a top 3 run here, depending on what everyone does. Give it somewhere higher. And if more people do keep stepping it up and up above it, and I end up having to give a 99, I was going to be fine with that.
In the finals, there was a couple runs that were really great. I'm talking about Teal and Ferdinand, who had some amazing runs where when they were done, I'm telling my friends who don't know anything about skiing, this could be on a podium type run. and then he got a 76 on it. And it was really technical, but it was like a confusingly low score there. And I don't know what your thoughts are, if you remember what I'm talking about.
Yeah, Teal is definitely one that I thought about after, because he really had something special in his run on the rail features, that giant lip 4 gap that he did.
Yeah.
When I was inspecting the course before the contest happened, it was kind of like thinking video game mode, be like, oh my God, you could go from here to here or there to there. And wouldn't that be sick if someone did something like that? And then as we're watching practice over the next couple of days, like riders just kept checking them off the list, these amazing lines through there. And the TV watching public didn't get a C because a lot of people didn't include it in their run, some of the amazing lines that these guys took through on practice. That was a tough one because it had one standout one, and it was one that was kind of nagging me afterwards. You know, like, oh, maybe that could have been ranked a bit higher. The balance, let's see, right 4, switch left 2 to 2, continuing 2, which isn't as much. Then the standout lip 4 gap, huge. Right up 10, or right up 10 safety, right up 12, switch left up 14. So for those, I mean, some of the subtleties of it, like 2 of his 3 jumps were forward takeoff right side. So there's 4 ways that you can spin on a 3-jump course. There he did forward takeoff right side spin on 2 of them. The switch left up 14 was dope, but a lot of people have that. So those are kind of some of the more technical things you dig into, where maybe some of the guys that ranked above had a little bit more variety on that side. But it could be weighed. I mean, that's the thing about this. It could be argued. There's always a good argument for that, for things to go either way. I mean, especially with one standout trick like that, jumps that were good.
I think Andre was another one. His second run was a surprise at 73, especially compared to when he got 85 in his first run, and his second run was really close. I think he might have come off something a little bit early, but it was such a big swing in points, where I get these are the best in the world and you need to see the best, but a 12-point difference was just surprising for me.
Yeah, and that was one that at this level of competition where we really look for the details. It was one where we used the replays. But looking at my notes here from judging the contest live, it has minor bobble up top on the quarter pipe hit, but I had him missing the grab, and we're really critical on guys that didn't get the grab. So on the trip at the bottom, I have him missing the grab. It was a no grab, and we hammered him for it.
Okay, and then in pipe, I'd say I agree with what I saw there. I mean, as far as overall impression, maybe Nico's run lacked the amplitude and style that the others had, but that's my personal preference. David wins. No one can match the 4 dubs like he did. And I think if you look at it, Alex probably had a little bit more style to his run, but style doesn't win out on 4 dubs. That's just how it is, right?
That's the way it was, man. I mean, and Alex, what a competitor, man. He kept going bigger and better on every single run. David's run is hard to compete with, seriously, just based on what he does. But Ferreira really gave it a run for his money. His final run there, he was going so big, did it really well. I gave it a point. Let's see, I gave Wise a 98, and I gave Ferreira a 97 on his second run there. I gave it to Dave for the technical aspect of it. Not only the 4 doves and the other trick he had in it, the right 10 op tail was, I mean, that's an insanely hard trick too, done to his right side. It's like, whew. But yeah, big props to Ferreira, man. He landed all 3 runs. He was the only one to do that. And I had a friend after the contest, like a day later, who described it best, because he was making an argument, like thinking that Ferreira could have gone on top. He said if Ferreira had crashed on any one of those hits, he would have turned to confetti. I was like, that's a good way to describe it.
I guess it doesn't even matter how big or how good he makes things look. If David lands his run like he did, he's going to win every time until someone else has those 4 dubs.
That's kind of what it came down to. I mean, it was the same when David took it at X 2 weeks before. He really put together a run that kind of checked all the boxes.
Back to general judging. Is there ever any personal bias that plays into it? And when I say that, are there any deep connections between athlete and judges? Are there any athletes or judges who are good friends or in sponsor relationships, or anything that would be fishy?
We have it in our code of conduct. I mean, we do, like I said, we encourage talking to athletes. You know, we see these guys all year long. Judges can definitely have preferences on the style they like or riders that they like. And we have a code of conduct and kind of rules that we live by on that, where we say, you know, every competition, we promise to judge this fairly without any regard for sponsor or nation or creed or anything like that. And for me and for most judges, I know, like, no matter if we like it or whatever, or if they're from our nation, like, I care so much more about coming out of it feeling like I got the ranking right than I could feel about anything else. Like, that's really what matters most. I could never imagine trying to do something with so much effort and passion to want to get the ranking right. I'd never even consider some other motive to take it any other way. So while we do have relationships with these guys, we know them, we talk to them, things like that. If you're a judge who truly cares about it, that's all that matters, is getting the ranking right, no matter what you know about the athlete or think about them or anything like that. And it's hard to leave past impressions behind sometimes, definitely, but it's something we have to really focus on doing. Yeah.
Do judges ever try to influence the sport, where this is going to be judged on spin to win this week, or it's going to be versed on style, or pushing their agendas of what they like in skiing to the other judges, so that's what the athletes need to do?
After competitions, sometimes before, at a lot of the World Cups, we'll have these judging conversations where we welcome all the coaches and athletes to come and give feedback. And a lot of times a coach or someone will say, like, hey, what do you want to say? And I'll always fire right back to them, be like, help us do our job better and tell us what you guys think. I mean, every competition, we just take what you put out there, what your athlete decides to do, and we assume that that's the way they want it to go. Like, we'll fire right back to them and be like, whatever you're doing out there, we're going to take that is where you want to see it go. Never want to have a judge. I don't want to be the one directing the sport here. I want the athletes to be the ones to do it. So anytime we get that question, which does happen, I really try and turn it around and have them give me some insight on what they think, which direction they think it should go.
And then how do you handle the criticism from athletes and coaches? Because I'm sure you get criticized at every event you're at.
Definitely. It's part of the game.
How bad does it get?
Actually, everyone keeps it fairly professional. Emotions will run high for sure, and people might be short right after the contest. But every contest, I'm always willing to open up my notes, show it, and if anyone's a good, confident judge, you should be able to open up your steno and say, hey, this is why I ranked this guy above you. And a lot of times it might be because they're seeing the number come in at a 74 or something like that, and they think it's low. And I'll say, okay, these are the runs that I scored above you. This is why I ranked you below that. I mean, that's the best thing we can do as judges, break it down on their execution or comparing it to the runs that we ranked above, really put the athlete in our shoes. And if you're a good judge, you can explain why you gave that score. I do it pretty much after any competition. Coaches and athletes can come up, give an explanation. Sometimes they may or may not agree with it, but at least if you've got a reasonable explanation for why you gave your score, they'll keep it professional, we keep it professional, and that's it. Over the years, stuff does happen. I had a pro's parent banging on the door once, and he was freaking out. Stuff does happen, but it's not as common as you would think.
Do you ever peek online and see what people are saying about the judging?
Yeah, definitely. Not often, like at World Cups throughout the year and stuff like that, but at the Olympics went on, a lot of times it can be completely unfounded. And kids rooting for what they do. You can never take it personally because, none of them were taking notes and making a mark for every little bobble or short grab or missed grab. No one else is paying as much attention and marking down these details as much as we are. So that's that. I definitely never stress about it. I can sometimes kind of read it to get a little pulse on what people think. I want to do my job as best as I can. And sometimes a lot of the comments are kind of out of left field and there's no grounds for why they think it would go this way or the other.
It's the power of the keyboard.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I'd always take it with a grain of salt. Never take it too personally because that could just ruin you if you did.
And then in terms of money, you'd mentioned that you didn't make much as a judge, and that was early in your career. The Olympic judges, you're there for what, 3 weeks?
The judges in Sochi, just based on the schedule, were there for 2.5 weeks. And based on the schedule for us here in Korea, the way our events lined up, I was only there for 10 days.
You're there for 10 days. And what can a judge expect to make? Because Devin said she won a silver in Sochi and she got like $12,500. Can you make more than that being a judge in your 10 days at the Olympics?
Definitely not. We make less than everyone, for sure. It's across the board. This goes from World Cups, and then it's the same pay at the Olympics, but we make 100 Swiss francs every day that we're judging, and that starts on our travel day. So for every day that we're out of the house, we're making 100 Swiss francs.
Can you speak English?
It's about $100 a day. Yep.
You could have said US dollars, it would have been easier. I definitely just wanted to get your take on everything that went on. I think there's always going to be questions about judging, and there's a reason for everything that happened. I think one of the confusions to me was that the number is really an arbitrary thing, that I shouldn't hold on to the number in my head because it's really just a way for you to position people and get that in the right place when you're scoring a run or scoring a contest.
You got it.
For the final part of this show, I do something called inappropriate questions. Sometimes I ask these questions, sometimes other people ask these questions. I talked to Roy Tuscany this morning of the High Fives Foundation, and he had 3 inappropriate questions for you, and I'm going to play the first one that you can hear, and then we'll go from there.
What do you got for me, Roy? Oh, boy.
Question number 1. Have you ever referred to your male member as the steel hammer or the steel rod?
I like it, and we're going to have to see what other people have referred to as hammer as well, because he can come up with some things, but I'm sure his partners have other names, so we'll find out all the names that have been used for Steele Spence. So that was the question. Have you ever referenced your member as the steel hammer or the steel rod? Or what do some of your other partners reference your member as?
I can honestly say I've never referred to it as the steel hammer, although I might now. That's amazing. No, the answer to that one's no, and typically we might refer to it as boner time.
Boner time. Keeping it classy. We'll go with question number 2.
You are now currently called the Ice God of Summit County. Are you in the mafia?
So, Ice God of Summit County, which is referencing your methamphetamine business. Probably not. It's actually referencing your ice business in Summit County. If you've bought ice from anybody else in Colorado, you're buying it from the wrong person. Steele, what's your business called?
That's right. It's High Country Ice in Silverthorne. It's the most random thing ever, but I've owned a local packaged ice company, bags of ice you'll see at the liquor store, convenience store, and events. The Ice God is a nice title there. That sounds pretty good. Yeah, thinking about delving into the methamphetamines on the side since I got the name going already, but haven't made that move yet. But
it can really fuel athletes.
You want to do better? Get some ice.
And Steele's a former pro who makes the best ice out there.
The best part about it is that nobody buys ice in Breckenridge in the wintertime, because as soon as you can keep your beer cold in the snow, our business goes way down. So keeps me busy in the summertime, and I can stay at events in the wintertime.
Final question for Steele today is, ever during a competition with Josh Lubeck on the podium judging criteria list, did you ever just yell, Lubinator?
Yep.
Many of times.
Come on, we all have.
Well, I think the most important part that Roy didn't ask is, can you give us your best Lubeck story?
So, let me think. Good Lubeck story. Well, Lubeck comes up often. He was really hammered us about keeping our range open as a head judge. So basically at every competition, Lubeck wants to remind us to keep the range, guys, like open up your range, guys, because he would pretty much hammer on that all the time and sometimes not bring much else to the table. So that was a good one. Lubinator. Man, I've heard good stories about Lubeck back in his pro skiing career days. I think that guy had a lot more fun than others, but not as much from the judging side. Sorry, Roy, I don't have any good ones.
Well, it's probably a good thing that there's no crazy stories from the judging side, because he was probably keeping it professional there. But I want to thank you, man. There was a lot of questions. You answered them all, and I think you shared a lot of insight, and it was awesome chatting. I've been a fan of your career over the past 20 years, but more so back from 2000 to 2005. Yeah, I thank you for your time, man.
Really appreciate it. I was happy to talk with you, man. It was fun to relive some old memories.
So that was time with Steele Spence. He is a ski OG, and he seems like a pretty cool guy for a judge. Anyways, my thoughts on the Olympics. There needs to be more technology with the judges. Each judge should have a screen for themselves where they can replay every feature and see the different angles for each feature. And it needs to be at the click of a button. It needs to be easy for these guys, and they need the time to judge these runs, which happens to be the most important runs of these athletes' lives. What I'm talking about is not rocket science. It's just the IOC investing in their judges. They invest in themselves and just about everything else but the athletes. They do it in pro sports, they do it in college, and I bet they even have a better system for other Olympic sports. But when it comes to ski and snowboarding, while we get the ratings, it doesn't seem like we have the best judging system possible. 20 seconds is just not enough, and that's that. Next week, we're getting away from the Olympics, and we're getting back to the roots of new school skiing. If you don't know Matchstick Productions, you haven't watched many ski movies in the past 25 years. They're one of the pioneering groups that helped change ski culture for the better by showcasing the best athletes on the planet. My guest is Murray Weiss, and he's the founder of Matchstick Productions, and he's going to take us through the life and times of the production company and himself. But that's on Monday. For now, I ask that you review me on whatever platform you listen to me on. Email me with any questions, concerns, or funny shit or whatever you have for me. My email is mike@thepowellmovement.com. And finally, I want to thank my sponsors for making the show happen. They are Evo, Rescue Water, the 10 Barrel Brewery, and the Summit at Snoqualmie. Thanks for listening, and have a great week, everyone.